the European Communities Act 1972 will be repealed on exit day. Hooray! Exit day is the 29th of March 2019. Hooray! However, in the appendix, a Minister of the Crown may by regulation amend the definition of exit day in section 1 to ensure that the day and time specified in the definition are the day the treaties cease to apply to the UK. I'm not a lawyer, but that seems to tell me that he doesn't have to apply that regulation to the 29th of March and it can be brought back. It goes on to say, the provisions of this Act, so far as they are brought into force by subsections 1 to 3, come into force on such day as the Minister of the Crown may by regulation appoint a different day or may appoint different days to be appointed for different purposes. Now, that sounds to me as though they could actually delay exit day, and of course we've heard that the so-called transition period can be extended, so I'm not sure that we're going to leave. What I've been told by our researcher, who is a qualified barrister, is that in order for parts of the withdrawal bill to be applied, regulations have to be passed, and that regulations have been passed on some parts of it, but not this most important part, which is that the actual exit day. So I think that it's quite possible that they will try to extend the actual leaving day on the basis that, oh no, we haven't sorted everything out yet and we're not able to leave on the day specified. One thing Mrs May said, which I do believe above all other things, she said, after the 29th of March, we don't want to be part of the European Commission. I don't necessarily believe that. We won't be part of the European Council. I don't particularly believe that. But one thing she did say, which I do believe, we don't want any more UK MEPs. Because what was the fly in the ointment? It was the fact that we had that UKIP gradually moved up the ranking until we came top in the European elections in 2014, and of course we are the only genuine leaving party in the UK, and she would happily sacrifice Conservative MEPs and the rest of them in order to get rid of UKIP from the European Parliament. So I do believe that's going to happen on the 29th of March. I don't believe that there are going to be more European elections, but we must wait and see what happens about the leaving day. And if you think a Minister of State can't do something about that, I don't know how many of you here are aware of something called the Civil Contingencies Act? Yeah, a few. Civil Contingencies Act was passed in 2004 by Blair, that great Democrat. And under the Civil Contingencies Act, if the government declares an emergency, a Minister of the Crown can remove every one of your legal rights and civil liberties, and you are then under the control of the government, and all your property is under the control of the government. They can tell you exactly what to do, where to go, and take your property from you if they want. And that is there, I suppose, in case an asteroid hits the Earth or a red Chinese parachute in and invade us or something like that. But this is an act of Parliament that is on the books, and a Minister of State with a stroke of a pen can do that. So don't you think a Minister of the State with a stroke of a pen can change the exit day if he wants to, if he gets that instruction from the Prime Minister? I think so. So if we did want to leave, what would we have actually have done? Well, first to be Brexit, of course, you need a patriotic government. That is the big weakness in my argument, of course. I fully understand that. You need a patriotic government and you need a patriotic House of Parliament. But if we'd had that the day after the referendum, what you would have done is to immediately repeal the 1972 European Communities Act. That always gets a round of applause whenever I say that. You would have done that as a first step, not a final step, because then we would have left under our law, not their law. And then the Prime Minister could have said to the European Union, we just left under our law. But don't panic, because all your laws remain in place. They've all been incorporated as acts of Parliament or by other means, and we are keeping them all in place. And in fact, Bill Cash, the Conservative MP, actually drew up a very useful draft bill, which I used as Appendix 1 in my plan. Saved me the trouble of trying to write it. He's a parliamentarian, he knew how to do it, which said precisely that. We leave, all the law stays in place. But we can now start to amend and repeal in accordance with our priorities and in our timescales. And then what you would have done, the Minister would have gone to the European Commission and said, we want continued tariff-free trade. You can have the free movement of goods, services and capital. You can't have people. Do you want it or not? Do you like things to remain as they are now? Tell us yes or no. Give you a few days to think about it, because if not, we can go on to WTO terms, which is actually probably more beneficial to us than staying in the European Union. Next big problem is the issue of citizens' rights. And then you could have said, as they're doing now, it's taken them all this time to get there, you can have rights in our country if we get the rights in your countries, and free movement across the European Union. And they are getting the much better end of the deal, because when people come here, they get all the same rights as a British citizen. They get the rights to public housing, the rights to the NHS, rights to education, rights to benefits. A lot of those things don't exist in European countries, European Union countries. Even somewhere you think they might have a national health service. No, they don't. You have to pay health insurance. And if it's no good going to Romania or Poland and asking for your council house and your benefits, because I think they'd probably laugh at you. So they were getting the best end of that deal, and they will be now when we give it to them. And in the European Parliament, I'm sure some of you have heard of Mr. Guy Verhofstadt. I went to a committee meeting with him where he said what they wanted to achieve, because he's actually the Parliament's liaison man with the Commission regarding Brexit. And it's like putting Al Capone in charge of a bank. He said, oh, what we have to have is not only these full rights for all the people who are already here, but also their children who might, and their descendants. And I said in the committee, I said to him, do you realise, I said, that the eldest member, or eldest person in the European Union recently died in Italy, aged 117. So if you're saying that this should go to the children of people now, on the day we leave, a European Union citizen could have a kid who doesn't die for another 120 years. So this could go on, this right to rights and full entitlement to everything could go on for another 100 years before it gradually tapers off. It's nonsense. And I said, how is that fair? I said, in the European Parliament, you constantly hear them talking about fairness, don't you? Everything's got to be fair. How can it be fair that people can turn up and claim everything that there is going under our law, but you go to their countries and there's nothing to claim anyway? I said, tell me how that's fair. And he just laughed at me. And that's their attitude. But of course we could offer them that deal. Government should have offered them that deal. You can have that, and then we will carry on to the next bit, which is money. We're not giving you any. We don't owe you any. Because we have been the second or third biggest contributor to the budget for every year that we've been a member of the European Union. The only year we ever got any money back and we were net beneficiaries was, funnily enough, 1975, when we had the first referendum on continued membership. And I don't know whether that was just by accident or deliberate, but it was the only year we actually made any money out of the European Union. And what we should have said, quite frankly, is we know that you're never going to give us our investment bank and all these buildings that we've built and everything else that we've given you money for, so we're going to cut our losses. Not sure about the investment bank, because they do owe us at least 9 billion, which is our money invested. But we would have said, we're not going to ask you for any money because you know you're not going to give it to us, and equally, we're not giving you any money. So forget it. And I don't know where this 39 billion came from, because all they could have asked for, if they had the cheek to ask for it, all they could have asked for would have been what was left out of the current budget term, which goes up to 2020. And I worked that out at the time, a year and a half ago or so. It was only about 37 billion then. And every month you pay your contribution, it goes down. So by now it would be quite a small amount of money, relatively speaking. So there was no need to offer them any money at all. So we dealt with trade, we dealt with people, we've dealt with the money, and then we say things like, we're no longer going to participate in your ambitions to create your own army. You can forget that one. And then there are lots of different areas of legislation. When I checked, it's in here somewhere, there's about, last time I checked, and it was from a European Union website, there were about 173,000 different bits of legislation, if you count every jot and tittle. You can't repeal that overnight. It can't be done. And a lot of it, I think, you'd have to prioritise. You'd have to do the important things first, say this is how we're dealing with it, and then the uniform size of wine glasses, or the uniform height of brake lights on farm vehicles, and yes, we did vote on that. It's always stuck in my memory. We won't deal with that. We'll leave that on the back burner. We may not look at that for another 20 years because it doesn't matter. But we'll deal with the important things first, and we'll do it in a spirit of friendship and cooperation, because we want trade, friendship and cooperation with you. Why wouldn't we? And you want that with us. And the realists in those countries would say they've made the decision to leave. There's no point in trying to stop them. We want trade to continue because we sell them far more than they sell us, and therefore it's not in our interest to do anything to impede that trade. What Mrs. May did say, and another thing that I believe, so there's two things anyway, was when she made the speech in Florence, which I think was January this year, if I remember, time goes so fast, in which she said she wants a security treaty with the European Union. Now that is very dangerous, because what she meant by that is that she wants to continue merging our armed forces into the proposed EU's armed forces.
Never, never.
It's been going on a long time.
I know.
I was in the, in my first term as an MEP, I was in the Security and Defence Committee, and even then, they were talking about 2004, 2009. This has been going on for many years. They're merging our armed forces into their armed forces structure by means of common procurement, common command and control structures, common communications. It's what the Galileo satellite project was all about. It wasn't commercial. We used to go to committee meetings where they say, oh no, it's commercial, you know, it's not about military. And then they couldn't find any customers, because they can get the same thing from the Americans with GPS for nothing. So why would they pay to go on Galileo? And then we had a committee meeting where finally they admitted that it was all about a military purpose. And of course now we've got this new agreement which the government entered into fairly recently, PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, which again is about merging our armed forces. And she wants to formalise that under a security treaty, which doesn't just include the military stuff, but also all of the police and criminal justice legislation, like the European arrest warrant. And if there is one thing that really gets me going on a platform, it's the European arrest warrant. Now, one of the most precious things that we've got in a free country is the freedom from arbitrary arrest and imprisonment.
Yeah.
If the police want to arrest you over some suspicious of a crime, they've got to take you to a court the next morning, and a magistrate or a judge will say, what's the charge? They've only got 24 hours. It can be extended in some circumstances, I know, for terrorist crimes. What's the charge? What's the evidence? And then he'll decide whether he's going to remand you on bail or on custody. Not if there's a European arrest warrant. All I have to do is tick a box of one of 30 accusations. No evidence is required, and I've sat through enough of these extradition courts at Horseferry Road to tell you that people are stunned. They say, well, we had nothing to do with it. We weren't even there on the day. And the judge will say, no, sorry, there's nothing I can do with it. I don't have any power to stop it happening. You will be carted off to whatever jail in whatever European country has issued the European arrest warrant. That, to me, is the most evil thing that has ever come out of the European Union. And I'm a hardliner on law and order, believe me. If you read the crime policy in the latest manifesto that we published. But the law, English law, was developed as much to protect the innocent as to convict the guilty. And all that is going out of the window. And there is a whole raft of these things. You can have your property taken away under what's called a common finance confiscation order. You can get back from a lovely holiday in Bulgaria, fantastic. Then you get a letter saying, oh well, the Bulgarian police decided that you broke every rule in the Bulgarian highway code, if they've got one, I'm not sure if they have, and you've been fined 10,000 euros. You say, rubbish, it's all produce of the corrupt Bulgarian police. And the judge will say, I can't do anything about that, mate. If he talks like, if he's you know, a fairly common judge, of course. He'll say, can't do anything about that. He'll say, I have no power in this, you will hand over the money, we're taking it off you. And that goes down to the order of €75 fines for parking offences. And there's a whole raft of this stuff out there, and they're adding to it all of the time. And this is what Mrs May intends for us. So this is how we would have left if we were serious about it. We wouldn't have asked them how we're going to leave. We would have told them how we're going to leave and told them how it's going to work. And this is why we're in the mess that we are now. And of course now you've got this whole thing about a meaningful vote and a second referendum. Well, first of all, a second referendum, if there was one, and personally I absolutely don't want one because we had the referendum. Even after Project Fear we still won it. I believe if there was a second referendum we'd actually win with a higher percentage.
Yeah.